Good morning ครับ everyone. Nice to see all of you again นะครับ Okay, on the last class we talk about the Power BI นะครับ in order to do a couple of things including getting the data in Power BI นะครับ from an Excel file and also we talk about like the data cleansing as well ครับ Right. So today we are going to continue the next thing that we have to do in Power BI นะครับ so everyone just open up your Power BI file that we used on the last class นะครับ it's about the ABC cells นะครับ that we just like get it from the e-learning. Now just have a look นะครับ for the file that we had on the last class. So on the last class, we talk about getting the data into Power BI and also cleansing the data นะครับ so in order to manage the data or manipulate the data that we get from the sources outside the Power BI นะครับ that normally in this class we get the data from our Excel file นะครับ you can see that whenever we get the data from Excel file, it's possible that some of the file that or some of the data that we get from the external source like Microsoft Excel may have like some point of data that we need to transform or we need to just modify or just manage it a bit in order to match with what we want นะครับ On the last class, when we get the data into Power BI, the things that we had was that, okay, let me have a short review a bit for what we did. We go to Home tab, and then we just like choose Get Data, choose Excel, and then we just like get the data into our Power BI. On the last class, when we get, you can see that it will show all of the worksheet that we have. Then we just choose what worksheet that we would like to get. If we have, let's say, 7 worksheets, but today we would like to get like the first 6 worksheet, that's okay. We can get the last worksheet later on. Once we get the worksheet of the data already, before we can just like click to see the preview on the right hand side first. After we see the preview of the worksheet already, it's possible that sometimes the data that we have might not match with what we want. For example, let's see. In this one, you can see that when we talk about the discounts in here, some of you would like to have it as a percent, instead of having just like the decimal values like this. The things that we can do is that we can, we can modify or we can transform the data type it later on after we get the data already. Some of you may say that, should we do it in Excel? In the reality, if you have the data source that is Excel, you can do it. But I mean, in some company, when they have the data and when you have to get the data, it's not from Excel. Where it's from? Sometimes you get the data from some other sources. For example, you may have the database, or you may have the data from the web. This kind of data that you get, you can't modify it inside the database or inside the web directly. The things that you have to do is that you have to get into Power BI first. And after that, you just like transform it in Power BI. Okay, that might be the best way to do. What about in our examination? The final exam, what will it look like? The data might look like this one. Might look like, might look like this. But I want you to have like, let's say, if I say that I want the data type to show as a percent, what should you do? I will ask you to do in Power BI only. I will not ask you to do in Microsoft Excel. So that means when we have this, this one, you have to just like use the tools in Power BI that we call it as Power Query. นะครับ the Power Query it is the tools that help us in order to just like what to say change the data type and it records what we have done so far as well. So that means when I go to check, I'll check in the Power Query whether you just like change the data type to be the percentage in there or not. Okay, so after we get like this kind of data in our Power BI already, you might see that some of the data that you try to get into Power BI might not match with what we want. For example, you can see that in hereนะครับ. If you have a look on the product worksheet นะครับ in Power BI we will call it as tables นะครับ we will call it as table, we will not call it as worksheet anymore นะครับ because I mean like it's possible that the data that you get into Power BI might come from different sources in database นะครับ from the database you get the data from different tables. In Power BI we call it as table as well, or if you get the data from the web page นะครับ from one page it might consist of many group of data. Each group of data will be called as a table as well, right? So the common words for each group of data that you get into Power BI will be called as table นะครับ Okay, now let's see. You can see that in here in the product table นะครับ in the product table the header นะครับ the current header right now is not what we want นะครับ also the second row of the data นะครับ has some values that we don't want it. The correct header that we really want to have is this one นะครับ product ID, product name, and so on. So what should we do? In this case, we have to get into Power BI first นะครับ and we manage it. So how do we gonna manage it? We will use the Power Query editor to do that นะครับ After we get all the data already นะครับ the next thing that we have to do before we just like do the visualization is that we have to transform the data นะครับ In this case we will clean the data first นะครับ In order to clean the data, the things that we need to have to use is that we have to use Power Query editor. And where is it? Power Query editor is in here นะครับ is in the transform data. Once you click on transform data นะครับ it just open up the Power Query editor for us นะครับ This is Power Query editor. If your Power Query editor is showing that the preview is not updated, just try to refresh it นะครับ before you just like do anything with your data. So on the right hand side, this is the steps that we can do with the Power Query editor and what we have done so far. These are apply steps. It tells us นะครับ step by step for what we have done in each table. So in this one, if you go to some tables that you would like to clean it, or if you would like to transform it, for example, in the product, you can see that in the product table here นะครับ the way we did was that we just eliminate the rows that we don't want. If you remember that for the preview of the product table นะครับ before we get into this Power Query editor, the first row was wrong and the second row was like the correct header. The things we did is that the first one, if you don't want the first row, we just like choose reduce row and choose remove row, remove top rows นะครับ and after that you have to specify how many rows would you like to delete นะครับ or remove. And for the original version of product table, we would like to remove one row out นะครับ the first top row. You just specify that I don't want one row and then you click OK นะครับ After that you just like would like to shuffle between the first row นะครับ and the header. We just like specify that we will use header we will use first row as a header instead นะครับ we will use first row as the headers instead. It's here นะครับ yes. Okay, so นะครับ after that when we have like just like change the data นะครับ or transform the data as what we want already นะครับ Sometimes if you would like to do some actions with your data, for example, if we just say that our data consists of some columns of fields that is very long one, for example. So for some field or some columns like this one in the order in the order table, if you have a look, you can see that the ship address is very long. Ship address is very long. So in case that we would like to analyze our data according to our need, we may want to know the ship country. We may want to know the ship country. And unfortunately, our original data, we have the ship country as a part of that column. Let's see, I show you the original data that we got in the order worksheet. You can see that in the ship address full column here, the country is located on the last part of each cell. So how do we gonna extract? How do we gonna extract the country from the ship address full? One thing you have to know is that you have to manage or you have to split these values out. One thing that I have to let you see is that you have to notice because it is case by case. What does it mean? In this example, you can see that in every single row, before you have the country, it will be something, some text, followed by comma, followed by country. They are always like this, in this set of data. So the things that you have to know is that if you would like to split this part out, you need to find a symbol that they use to separate the country from other text. This is normal in the reality. We always do like this in order to just type the data into some column or into some field. They always have some symbol to use for identifying that it will be some values like the country, like this one that we have. Or sometimes we may have a space and then followed by like this. We may have a space followed by zip code, something like that. So you can see that, okay, in this one, the symbol that they use to identify the zip code, they use a space or a blank. But in this case, in this example, they use comma as the symbol. The symbol that we use to separate the value that we want, we call it as delimiter. We call it as delimiter. The things that we have to do is that we have to identify what delimiter we are going to use in order to get the value. And Power BI has just like the flexible kind of tools for splitting the columns or the field that we have. Apart from delimiter, we can also specify the position to split as well. For example, suppose we are having the data like this. We have the student ID, for example, 6380113, something like this. Okay. Okay. For your student ID, this one, okay, let me just tell you first. For a student ID of MUIC, it has the meaning too. I hope that many of you might know what they mean. The first one, 63. This is the year that you enter MUIC, right? Okay. Next, 8. 8 tell us that it's MUIC student. Suppose I say that I want to split this student ID. I want to know that I want to count, let's say, how many students in this database are MUSC students. That means I have to split these student IDs, and then I will fix this one, and I say that okay, this one is faculty. So what should I do? In this one, you can see that there is no common spatial character, because sometimes you may have the student ID like this. You can see that there is nothing in common in order to split this faculty out of the student ID at all. But in this one, you can see that the things that are common that we use to split the student ID out of to split the faculty ID out of the student ID is that we know the position. We know the position that the faculty ID is in position number 3. Then you can split by using the position number as well. You don't need to have just the you don't need to split by using just the delimiter, but the position number is okay too. And also you can specify that okay, in which position, left or right, that you would like to split, because sometimes the data that we want is on the left, sometimes the data that we want is on the right. Then in Power BI Power Query Editor, you can just like specify the position as well. Now let's see, when we go back to Power BI, in order to split, you have to just like specify this one. You go to split column. Let me just have a look first where can which one that we can split more. Okay, if you have a look on the orders worksheet, or orders table, after we split chip address full, you can see that in here on the last part, some of them might be zip code, but it's not always. Some of them might be like phone number, something like that. Okay, we will just like try splitting this one first, but it might look strange. Okay, so before we split, in this one, I always do this, if I'm not sure whether it will work well or not. What should I do before I split? Normally, I will copy the current column first to be in another column. So what for? If I do something wrong, I can reverse the step. I can reverse the step. Okay. Okay, so in this one, how to duplicate the column, Firstly, you choose the column first, and after that, okay, let me just check because they just like change the position of the menu once again. Okay, it's here. You just like choose that column, right click, and then you choose duplicate column. You choose duplicate column. So you can see that right now it's the same name, but it said that okay, it's with dash copy. This one is the copy version of your column, while the original version is still there. While the original version is still there. Okay. So now we will try splitting this column. We will try splitting this column by using the delimiter, comma once again, to see whether it shows the zip code or not. In this one, the way we do is that we just choose the copy version of chip address full, choose split column, choose split column. And this one we choose by delimiter once again. This one you can see that we have to use comma once again to split. And in this one, we will use rightmost delimiter because we want the data from the rightmost ones. We want the data from the rightmost ones. Okay, like this, like this, like this. Okay. After that, we just choose okay. So right now it's splitted already. It's splitted already. Okay. So because the standard of the zip code in different countries might be different, so that means in this one, it may help us to just like to see the symbol that each country use for use as a zip codeนะครับ. So this is a way to split. But if you don't wantนะครับ, you can just undo itนะครับ. Now let's talk about the undoing in Power Query Editor. You can see that every stepนะครับthat we have done will be shownนะครับ, will be shown as the step in hereนะครับ. So the time or the actions that you doนะครับ, the latest action that you do will be on the last rowนะครับ. So that means if we go backwardนะครับ, the order action will be like on the topนะครับ. Okay, in this one, so it means that we split column hereนะครับ, means that we have the new column here. So if we don't want it, it means that you have to cancel these actions. How do we gonna cancel? You will see this, the symbol here, the cross symbol hereนะครับ. Every time when you click on each action or on each step, you see the cross symbol. If you don't want, you just click to cancel. Now it just like go to split column by delimiter. If you don't want, you cancel it. Now the column that you split will be just like undo. And then for the chip address in this one, it's just like the one that we copyนะครับ. We copy or we duplicate, it's hereนะครับ. This is the step that we did. If you don't want, you just click cancelนะครับ. Okay, so in this one this is the way to split and also to what to say undo the steps that we did so far. So in this oneนะครับ, one good thing for the Power Query Editor is that later onนะครับ, if we finish doing everything and you save it already, next time when you open up this file and then you go back to Power Query Editor again, all of these steps are still here. You can undo it, or you can have a look what you didนะครับ, on the last time. Or if this file is like was processed by other people like your colleagues and they send it to you, you can also see that what they didนะครับ, with this fileนะครับ, with this original data as wellนะครับ. Okay, right. So after we have this one alreadyนะครับ, make sure that every timeนะครับ, when you finish doing anything with your dataนะครับ, in the Power Query Editor, if you would like to confirmนะครับ, or what we callนะครับ, in the computer sense, we call it as committingนะครับ. We have to commit your actions. We have to commit your actions. How to commit the actions? You have to choose close and apply. So the things that you didนะครับ, will be saved. Now we close and apply the steps that we have done. Okay. So it will go back to your Power BI นะครับ the query will be analyzed นะครับ and then it will be just like processed นะครับ in your Power BI. All right, now we come back to Power BI already. So to see the changes นะครับ we just go to the data view นะครับ we go to the data view and then we just have a look on our table นะครับ the table that we did was orders table in here. You can see that the things we did was that the last action I did was that we had just like the duplicate of the ship addressนะครับ. I undo of splitting the ship address copyนะครับ, for the zip code. Okay, so now you can see that when we have this data sheetนะครับ, if you don't want itนะครับ, if you don't want this columnนะครับ, in Power BI it also allow you to delete this column if you don't wantนะครับ. But in order to manipulate the data as you did in Power Query Editor, in the basic Power BI desktop นะครับ it doesn't allow you to do so. For example, if you would like to split the columns นะครับ you can't do it. If you would like to trim the data, it doesn't allow you to do so นะครับ okay so talk about trimming a bit นะครับ you can see that the data that we split on the last class นะครับ it was like this นะครับ this is the chip address full and chip country that you split it. You can see that, okay, if we are talking about the example here, the first row that you see on my screen, it will be 0, sorry, it will be comma 05454-876, comma, Brazil. What happened was, between comma and Brazil, it has a space. So once you split the column out, once you split it, the newly splitted column will also consist of a space. Will also consist of a space before the word Brazil. So that's why in this one you can see that it is space and Brazil here. This one, if you use the visual นะครับ in the report view นะครับ to detect the country, space Brazil is not a country, then it means that once you just like use the visual that is the map นะครับ the country map or the global map, it doesn't detect the country of this one. So that's why you have to eliminate the leading space out of the country name. The way to do is that you have to use the function trim นะครับ we have to use the function trim in order to trim the country นะครับ I mean to trim the leading space นะครับ out of the country name นะครับ that one we had to do in the Power Query editor only นะครับ in just the data view in Power BI you can't do it นะครับ okay so in this one now we may have to go back to the Power Query editor once again นะครับ by going to home, transform the data. Okay. For trimming นะครับ for trimming you can see that in here นะครับ if you would like to trim, we just go to the column that you would like to trim the values นะครับ when you trim, it will trim every single cells นะครับ in that column. We just like right click and then choose transform, then you will see a function called trim here นะครับ it will trim like unwanted characters, especially for space นะครับ or the extra space that we really don't want. For example, if you have a city name, for example, if you have a city name Palo Alto, and the Palo Alto here นะครับ has 2 spaces. If you apply trim, what will happen? From Palo space Alto, it will become Palo and then just 1 space only Alto, something like that, because it knows that this one is extra space นะครับ trimming function will eliminate the extra space out of the necessary space that we want, including the leading space as well, that actually we never want this one นะครับ so that's why it just like eliminate for us. Okay, after we just like trim the data already นะครับ the next thing that we do is that, okay, I close this Power Query editor first. We just like have to look around all the data that we have. If it's okay already, then we can just like use the Power BI in order to visualize the data. Okay, so also last time I talked about this one. I talked about the model as well. It's possible that sometimes the data is not linked properly. Normally, the Power BI will try to analyze all the modeling for you. The model here help us in order to just like use some data that we want. For example, suppose we would like to know that which customer purchased from us the most. The things that we have is that, okay, the things that we have is that, okay, the first one, okay, for example, from the order, you know just customer ID, right? But you don't know the customer name. But if you just like create a visual that you choose company name, in here, if they don't have any relationship, it doesn't show the company name for you because it's not related to each other. So that's why this is the importance of modeling. You just know in this one, in the exam, I will not ask you to do the to create the relationship by yourself. How can Power BI justify the relationship? So basically, it will check from the field name. You can see that because in these two tables, between customers and orders, they have a field called customer ID. So when these two fields are the same, Power BI will link these two tables together, and they will look up the company name by using customer ID that you send from order, and then it will find the matching customer ID and look up the company name and show in your visual, okay, right? But in the reality, when you just like create a visual and it doesn't show the company name correctly, what should you do? You have to check first whether they have the same field name like customer ID and customer ID or not, because sometimes we might see this in one table. You have a field called customer number, and in another table you have customer ID. As human beings, we can analyze that these two fields are the same thing. But Power BI is a machine. It doesn't know. The things that we have to do is that you have two choices. The first one, rename the column to be the same name. Or if you said, no, I insist to use this field, customer number and customer ID. In that case, what should you do? The first one, if you rename it from customer number to be customer ID, Power BI will justify automatically that this one is this one they are the same name. Then they will just like automatically like remodeling, finding out the relationship by itself. But otherwise, if you insist not to change the name, the things that we do is that we have to create the relationship by ourselves manually. The way to do is that you just drag, drag customer number from customer table to customer ID in another table. It is like this. Let me just show you. Right now, you can see that I just delete the existing relationship out. Now I want to create by myself. The way to create is that you drag the fields that you think that they are the same thing to another table here. Then Power BI will justify the relationship for you. If you want to check, you double click on the line, and then you can see that there are two fields in gray color. There are two fields in gray color. Those are the fields that are linking in this relationship. So when they link like this already, that means you can find company name, you can find contact name or whatever thing from another table directly, right? Okay, so when we have this one already, we can just create the visual. We can create the visual as you want. For the visualization that we have, each of the icon in the visualization, once you create in the report in this one, นะครับ in this blank page นะครับ this part we call it as a report นะครับ when we just like choose any symbol here นะครับ to there we call the each one as visual in your report okay it depends on what you want